So we want to talk about what we're actually doing in Oberlin, and many of you are involved in very similar kinds of things. But the last 5 or 6 years of my life, we did a work for a foundation on the side, and we spent about $1.2 million to do a climate action plan for the next U.S. administration, be it Democrat or Republican. So we did the route of trying to get the president to change policies. And the thinking behind this is really very simple. The climate change is, as all of you know, the issue of our time. It's not another item on a long list of issues. It's the linchpin issue. It connects all these other things. Get that right, you get lots of other things right. And then the other thing here was that we just don't have time. Time's the one thing we do not have. And if this is, as we all suspect it is, a nonlinear system, we're reaching what we call tipping points, and we're not going to like what occurs out of this. But that was at 35,000 feet. We all know that the climate bill did not pass. Steve Cochran and many of you in this room worked really hard to get legislation across. It didn't happen. So now we're down to what Lester Brown calls Plan B. What do we do now? And so for me, it was, what do I do where I am? And how do we start what Bill McDonough once called a fierce commotion at the grassroots and have that cascade into a larger national movement? So let me tell you about the Oberlin Project. By the way, I need a clicker here. Is that right here? Super, Emily, thanks. This says flush on here. What happens if I do that? All right. This is, and my colleagues here, John Peterson strapped a really wonderful first-year student to a helium-filled balloon and gave him a camera with electronic download. We got this picture that way. The kid didn't transfer, he just kind of drifted away. He was such a nice kid, too. we love him. He was a young Sidhu Johnston, probably, I don't know. Anyway, this is Oberlin, a very typical small Ohio town. It's a town started in 1832. The college, this is going to sound like an advertisement, but the college turns out more young people that go on for PhDs in sciences than any other comparable liberal arts college in the country, and that's year after year. So science is very big there. It's got a conservatory of music that's ranked with Eastman and Juilliard and so forth, and there are 400 and some concerts, recitals, and performances in this city. I mean, it's an incredible music town. It's got the #3 art museum in higher education behind those of Harvard and Yale. So arts and music and science and a great liberal arts college. So this is a place where lots of stuff happens. But we are starting around the Oberlin Project, starting around a series of questions. Can we begin to rebuild the ideas of sustainability in the context of a little city of a little bit less than 10,000 people? And can we begin to do the things that all of us know about sustainability? Can we bring the parts together? The last item here is really the most important. Can we do this as a system? And we've talked about systems for a long time in this movement, but can we begin to do systems development, not green development or green building and solar energy and so forth? Can we bring all these 7 or 8 or 10 components together so that the parts reinforce the resilience, the prosperity, the equity, and the decency of the whole thing? So this is an attempt to do what I think really has not happened very well before. So these are the kind of questions we're asking in the Oberlin Project. We are Rust Belt. So the economic gravity mass of the Rust Belt region is going to take us where it goes unless we can begin to turn this around. And one of the very exciting things is to see Rust Belt cities, Detroit and Cleveland and Toledo and even Youngstown, Ohio, begin to fight back. And so some of the things, the worst things you can see are in those areas, but also some of the most exciting things you can see. And so we're part of that region. And the goal is to begin to link up with lots of other folks in the region. We are a very typical Ohio small town. That used to be a school. It's been renovated into an art museum. Very typical downtown. But like most college towns in this area, if you don't sell beer and pizza, you're in trouble. We've got to deepen the economy. And we've got to figure out what a sustainable economy really does look like. So all the theory that's gone into many of you, John Gowdy and Herman Daly and many of the great thinkers in this movement, how to begin to take that across the line into Main Street reality. And that means begin to rethink prosperity and begin to calibrate prosperity as we see it with the way ecosystems work and what they can actually regenerate. The Apollo Theater until the college bought it. This was a theater in town, $2 on a Thursday night. First run, it was like walking back into 1928. The college bought it, and so it's part of this Green Arts District. It's being renovated into a cinematography program. So this is a series of slides. This is a Cass Gilbert building. The famous architect Cass Gilbert did 4 major buildings in Oberlin. This is Finney Chapel. Can all of you see over here? Am I blocking? Mary Ellen's sound asleep anyway, so she's... This is a Cass Gilbert building. This is a lead-rated jazz building, the only lead-rated jazz building in the world. Music is a big part of this. What's funny about that? Say lead-rated jazz building? Okay, so the universe is only 2, but you know, we're number 1. Anyway, this is a lead-rated jazz building, community lead gold. All right, this is the Adam Joseph Lewis Center. This is a project that we did 10 or 15 years ago. Broke ground in this in 1998, and this building is mostly powered by sunshine. If you get all the things corrected, it will be entirely powered by sunshine, but I can't make that claim quite at this point. This is south, you probably can't see that, north, east, and west. And what we did on this building was kind of like what Thoreau did when he went to Walden. He said, I went to Walden to drive some of the problems of living into a corner where I could study them. We tried to do the same thing in an 1.25 acre site, drive some of the problems of sustainability into a small site where small enough that young people can get their heads around them. There's a handle on that pond. You can study food production, water purification, solar systems, and so forth. So this became kind of proof of concept for the Oberlin Project. A more current picture of the building, indoor picture. This is, you can't see him here, but Bill McKibben was giving a lecture in April, and we had a 7-inch rainstorm going on outside. And I was taking this picture up in the balcony looking down on the atrium, and Bill was standing there talking. Behind him, he couldn't see this. A group of Oberlin students are frolicking naked in the rain. And that happens from time to time. This is the back of the building. This is the only thing that is missing here is that there is a conference room that has been added back here, but the idea of making this generally all curriculum. So the front of the building is a solar plaza. The east side is a replica of the kind of ecosystem that had been in that spot before European settlement. The back of the building is a working landscape and so forth. This is the solar array, and there's several pictures taken. This, I think, is the one I took, or it took one exactly like it. Got up on a ladder, waited for the sun to hit the roof just at the right angle. And this building has had an amazing impact around the world. And I want to show you part of what that impact is. Last year, I was in England, and I found that the picture that I took is on the label of Harvey's beer. So my people are talking to their people. The settlement we're driving for is 1 case of beer delivered to 114 Fairway Drive in Oberlin. That's my address. Anyway, we have had some impact. This is John Peterson's work. When we opened the building, one of the goals is to make the building transparent. And so John came on the faculty about the time the building opened, strung wires for 160 data sensors or some such, and the result was a company that John fathered called Lucid Designs, which is one of the great high-performance building monitoring companies in the world right now. And students claim that they can monitor anything in a building, including when faculty in their upstairs offices flatline. There's a special alarm that goes off. I don't believe that. Now, the Oberlin Project has 4 goals. Let me just put them up here. The first goal is to take a downtown block, a 13-acre block that is right central to the city, that the college owns entirely, the whole block, and develop that block, power it by sunshine, do everything in that block that we did with the Lewis Center. Zero waste, powered by sunshine, all the things that go into green building at the Platinum Plus scale, with one additional proviso, that this block be a driver in the local economy and begin to be an integral part of the community in a way that buildings typically have not been and neighborhoods are not often. And so that's goal number 1. Bill Browning, who's here with us, just a charrette for the design of the block, or a portion of the block. We just came here this morning from that charrette. The second goal is to do all this, but get to carbon neutrality, both the city and the college. So not just the college, but the city also. And rethinking the entire energy system. We believe we can do that and create jobs, lower expenses, and do all kinds of other things. We want those two goals to relate to each other. Third goal is to develop a 20,000-acre green belt around the city. So we're now looking at, we're surveying about 40,000 acres around the city, doing GIS mapping and so forth, of soils and farm types and so forth. And the goal here is to figure out if we can grow 70% of our food locally. And then the last goal is to do all this the way we did the Lewis Center as an educational venture. And so we've got an incredible team of designers, some of you in the room, engineers, architects, urban planners, and thinkers, and lots more to come. And can we begin to get young people, maybe 1,000 over the next 10 years, to work with those design teams in ways that generates the next generation of problem solvers, but using us as a laboratory. So this phrase in the top of the screen here, full spectrum sustainability, is a fancy way to say you're going to have lunch with a lot of different people. So full spectrum just means if you want to combine lots of things together and do sustainability as a systems concept, you've got to reach across a lot of the boundaries by which we organize the industrial and the academic and the corporate world. So if, for example, if you want to develop local foods for a hotel that we're developing, a 4-star restaurant, then you've got to get young people back on the land. That's not where they're headed. They don't know about farming. So that means you've got to have your education team at the table. And then secondly, farming's expensive. You've got to have capital, and so young people need access to low-cost or zero-cost capital. You've got to have a market for it, so you've got to have the marketing team there. So you've got 3 or 4 or 5 teams to do one thing, and that's going to be true all the way through the development effort. So the systems concept, or full spectrum sustainability, means a lot of working across boundaries. So we've organized the community actually into more than 7 teams. I just couldn't figure out how to get 8 or 9 or 10 balls on the screen. But we've got about 11 working teams. John and Cindy and Anders are part of those teams, have been a major part of what we're doing. But the goal here is to begin to organize the community around this concept of full spectrum sustainability. So the community's organized. We probably have about 250 people engaged in this. Now, you don't want to read this, but let me just point out, this is what professors do. Donella Meadows, the late Donella Meadows, wrote an article, many of you would have read it, called Leverage Points. And it is a terrific article. Just, you can Google Donella Meadows, leverage points, and this is what comes up. But we're trying to understand where you intervene in this system called Oberlin, the city, and the college, and the region. Where are the points where you intervene to get maximum leverage, where a little bit of change produces a lot of results? Her thinking started, the least effective thing you do is subsidies and policies and rules. The most effective things are down here, where you begin to talk about paradigm changes in worldviews. But that's, you've been talking about that all day, and you'll talk about it tomorrow as well. The first goal is the Green Arts District. That is Tappan Square. These are the ingredients that we want in the Green Arts District: a hotel, major assets that we do not now have, jazz club, and music and art and so forth, but we need a destination-worthy hotel. So that's going to be the #1 priority. But there are other ingredients there also. Now, the point of this is to do this in a way that begins to drive the local economy, make it a buyer of services and goods and food, wood products and artwork and so forth. So this is what it looks like on a Google map. Now, this is a really ugly picture. Cindy said don't use it, and I probably should have taken it out, but let me point out a couple things. This is the Allen Art Museum. This is the Cass Gilbert Building, and it's the #3 ranked art museum in a U.S. college campus. Before the market collapse, it was about a $2.2 billion collection of art. There's some of us on the faculty that wanted to sell it and prosper, but it didn't happen. But this is a major, that was a joke, by the way. You can get killed for saying things like that in Oberlin. This is an art conversation. This is a performing arts center. This is a hotel that we're now working on, and this will all be replaced. There's an east, west, north, south wing. Now, the point of this is this. A lot of what we do in this field is really wonky, and it is really boring. I find it interesting, you do, but the people out there in the public typically do not. Now, can we start a conversation with the public that includes art of all sorts, plastic arts, performing arts, written arts, includes drama, includes the sciences, includes music, and oh, by the way, the food is raised locally, the restaurant's great, and the hotel was terrific. Can we begin to sponsor that conversation and bring those parts together? And if you press me to say, what's the conversation look like, that's beyond my pay grade. I don't know. But that's a conversation we've got to have. We've got to begin to hit all facets of the human personality to really begin to move people in this direction. This has to be a celebration, but it's got to have science in it. It's got to have facts and numbers, but it's also got to have good food, good hospitality, art, and drama. We've got to be full spectrum thinkers in this field. So this is the west face of the block. This will probably be a parking lot, Lord knows. And then the rest of it's being programmed. So that's what it looks like from the air. This is a Cass Gilbert building. This was redone at the LEED gold level this last year. So this is the first major piece. This is $11.2 million renovation. That is a performing arts center. It needs everything on the east side of that facade needs to be replaced. This is a 1955 motor inn built to the exacting comfort and aesthetic standards of motor inns in 1955. It is a plausible argument for limited nuclear war. The Board of Trustees got interested in this a couple years ago when the bed bugs arrived. Remember that infestation a few years ago? The bed bugs arrived about 2 weeks before the Board of Trustees meeting. I was on an airplane going back to San Francisco with one of the board members who claimed to have had 42 bites. And I heard about every one of the 42 in that 18,000-mile trip from Cleveland to San Francisco. Anyway, that's what we're working on to replace. Bill Browning is part of our design team to work on that. This is a project we're really proud of. This is 3 former Oberlin students who, quote, failed to launch. Hung around, started a development company, did a $17 million project here, 3 different buildings, 33 condominiums above and businesses down here below. This is not the architecture. These are placeholders for what that block would look like. Second goal, climate neutrality. We're one of now 14 cities that are part of the Clinton Climate Initiative that's being rolled into the C40 cities. This is our energy use in town. Cindy France, by the way, has done a terrific job organizing the energy committee, co-chaired with the head of a local municipally owned utility. And Cindy is, by the way, writing a column for the local paper, because one of the things that has to happen is the civic IQ about energy and ecological issues has got to rise. We've got to be smarter people. So this is part of this effort. But anyway, our energy will be about 90%, I think the number is, or 85 or 90%, carbon neutral because we're tapping into landfill gas. And then there's a whole other story after that. Sherrod Brown, our senator, I put this in here because Sherrod, right after I took this picture, you see him often on Rachel Maddow. And he is a terrific representative from Ohio, but also a great citizen of the country. Sherrod asked me where we got this array. This was put in the early part of the last decade, and our choice when we bought this array was to buy it from Germany or buy it from Japan, but now it would be China. And the irony was not lost on him because, in this case, the NASA Glenn Space Center, where a lot of that technology was first developed, is 24 miles away. The largest solar manufacturer was 50 miles to the west, First Solar, at that time. But we had to buy it outside the country. This is no way to run a country. 20,000-acre green belt. We'll do what green belts do, but we want to begin to build a zone of prosperity, green prosperity around the city. And the goal here is to see if we can get to 70% of the food consumed locally to be grown locally. And this is the first edition of this. This is called the Jones Farm. This is a 75-acre farm we started about 10 years ago. And then finally, education. Let me just put it this way. I can't think of any part of the curriculum that ought to be left out of this. This ought to be a big conversation. This isn't about just science. This isn't about just policy. This is not about architecture. This covers everything. It covers the classics and psychology and all the way out to literature. This is a part that ought to be woven through the whole curriculum. And then what do students do? If you happen to be a grad student, go back and spread the word that if you put eco or environmental in front of any other career area, anything you can possibly think of doing with your life, it's a better career. You're mixed with people like you all. This is a great crowd, but this is part of a global movement now. And if you get real quiet, you can hear it. This is now, 10 years ago or 20 years ago, this was not a global movement. It is now. So encourage young people to get involved in this. So let me close with a couple of final thoughts. if you take a beam of light and run it through a crystal, it refracts at different wavelengths and so forth. So what's the Oberlin Project? If you're a young person coming to Oberlin, you come into a 24/7 city. Instead of a small Ohio town that is down on its luck and we've got a 28% poverty level and things stop at 9 o'clock at night, you come into a vibrant downtown. If you're a faculty member, as three of us here are, it's just a better town. It's a place where you're proud to be. If you're a local business person, there's more dollar volume through the local economy. If you're Sherrod Brown or Marcy Kaptur, our representative, it's a solution that actually is beginning to work to rebuild Rust Belt economies. Imagine that. For Bill Clinton, it was, he thought that we were part of an effort that could be carbon neutral quickly. We're small enough to be agile theoretically, big enough to be significant. And the last item here, several years ago, I was down at a meeting in Washington, and the guy sitting beside me was Colonel Mark Mickleby. We were getting to know each other. He said, what do you do and what do I do? And he happened to pick up the project description that I put on the table for the Oberlin Project. He said, oh, that's all about national security. And Puck Mickleby worked at that time for the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. And there was increasing concern about national security not starting at the shores and borders and working out, the deployment of force to Afghanistan and that kind of thing, but starting at shores and borders and working in. And so the electric grid, they will tell you it is going down. It's not a matter of whether, it's a matter of when it goes down. The food system and the educational system. So we began to think about what we do with this. That's Mickleby up there in the left-hand corner, and Patrick Doherty down in the right-hand corner. Patrick works at the New America Foundation. Mickleby is now retired from the service, but the three of us, along with Bill Becker, have joined to start something called the National Sustainable Communities Coalition. And the idea here is to begin to build a coalition of similar kinds of full-spectrum projects around the country. Not trying to start anything. This means taking organizations that already exist, begin to band them together and do what organizations and networks can do. Amplify, deepen the purposes, accelerate the progress, share best practices, and so forth. And Link is part of a network of networks. So we've opened an office in Denver. We'll open one at DC at the New America Foundation. And the goal here from the military perspective was to begin to think about this word resilience. We all have heard about it, but what's that mean? Lots of definitions. It's basically an engineering term. Mickleby's definition up here was to take a gut punch and come back swinging. You can tell he's a Marine. You've been in barroom brawls or something. But it means communities that in a black swan world, and I'm not talking about the movie, I'm talking about Nicholas Taleb's book. In a black swan world of Fukushimas and financial crises and climate change-driven weather disasters that we will see, we are already seeing them. Communities that begin to have a little stretch to them, a little imagination, more ingenuity about energy and food and water and emergency support and all those things that make for survivable communities. So what we're doing in the network is really two things. One is starting with this idea of resilience at the local level. Communities and neighborhoods beginning to come together around all the things that you and I have been part of for years, but done now in a systems context. And then hitching that wagon to an idea of a dream of what this country can be when we grow up. What do we want to be as the United States of America, as a fully mature society of wise, intelligent people? So there's a long effort now to build a new or very different national strategic narrative or a grand strategy. That's a whole nother subject. I edited a journal that came out in January called Solutions. That issue was given over to sustainability as national security. So it's a beginning to bring things together. This isn't just environmental. It's not just about climate. It's not just about equity. It's not just about security. It's about all of those things as part of a system. So security by design. One of the interesting things here is that the idea of beginning at the bottom and working up. That's the only thing left of us. Congress is broken for reasons you all talked about this morning. It's going to be a while before Steve Cochran straightens out Washington, D.C., but you'll get to it. But that's not where we can start right now. What the opportunities before us are at the local level. It's neighborhood by neighborhood, campus by campus, city by city, region by region, begin to build that. But can we do this in 10 years? Can we create our equivalent of a Tea Party movement? But imagine that movement powered by science and sunshine, not bullshit. My wife says don't ever use that word publicly, so I don't do that anymore. Anyway, let me close with a couple of thoughts. It is so easy for groups like this to get depressed. And every one of you, if you've been really honest, and the climate change has hit you in the gut where it ought to hit you, and you begin to feel this, the odds of us making it as an intact civilization of 2100 aren't all that great. If you're at an intergalactic betting parlor in Alpha Centauri, you're not going to put a whole lot of money on Homo sapiens being sapiens. That's just not a good bet for you. But when you get really serious about this, this is an interesting era. This is make or break for us. And if we do the things that we know how to do, with a sense of wartime urgency and alacrity, this doesn't have to be a bad world. It's a world of local foods and more bike trails and fewer malls and less television and more neighbors. And the word neighbor as a verb, not a noun. It's a world that begins to bond together and stitch together. So the goal here is 500 years out, 1,000 years out, people look back at this time and this was our finest hour. We can do that world, but we've got to believe in it. It's going to happen in groups like this. And then I like this, Robert Fulghum. Remember that little book called All I Needed to Know I Learned in Kindergarten? I mean, look at this. This is just beautiful. What we have to do is play fair, clean up your own mess, share your cookies, don't take things that aren't yours. Hold hands crossing the street in danger and say you're sorry when you hurt somebody. How's that for rules? And I think if those rules work, they're going to start at the bottom up. Hey, thank you all.